Okay, so we're going to look at another example now. In that previous example, we learned a few things. The output of a document.write is HTML. And so it has to be structured properly like HTML. And then the final page must be rendered, is going to be rendered then as a HTML page. One person had a mistake where the header wasn't closed off properly, so the output of the document.writes was going into the header rather than the body, and then it wasn't displaying on the page. A lot of other people had mistakes where just tiny things. So, you know, a missing bracket somewhere, or a, you know, missing quote or a bracket the wrong way. So that's one of the problems with JavaScript, is that it's not terribly forgiving. But even it's not so much that Java isn't terribly forgiving, it's that the debugging tools we have for JavaScript aren't terribly sophisticated, I guess. Because if you were to do that in other programming environments, you know, you'd get, you know, it would be fairly alarmed and would start giving out to you. So it can be tricky to debug JavaScript. So you need to get to grips a bit with the tools that are there. I like the error console in Firefox. It just gives a quick scan. It tells you what went wrong, or tells you when it found out something went wrong somewhere, which isn't always the same thing. So I was getting an error there in one place for an else if, but there was nothing wrong with the else if. It was that the bracket before it was the wrong way around. So sometimes the debugger doesn't tell you exactly what you want. So it's important to get to grips with what tools you have for debugging JavaScript. And at home, you can install whatever you like, you know, to whoop its ass. Because it can be troublesome. You know, a little hair out of place, the browser doesn't tell you very much. We're going to look at another program now, which is going to also use the document.write. Okay, so it'd be better now maybe if you didn't, if you listened rather than typed for this one, and you can type it in later. So what this program will do is it will display a random image from a selection of images when the page is loaded. And it does that by using the random number generator that's built into JavaScript. Now, randomness is great for games, and it's also great for exercises in probability and stuff, and doing things, solving some problems you solve using random numbers. We're going to just display a particular image from a selection of images at random. So just looking up at the top, it's a bog standard web page like all the others. You have your HTML, your header, your title, and then you have your body. This uses some very old HTML. Here we're setting the color of the background inside in the body tag. And we're also using a center tag there. You wouldn't see those things in modern web pages no anymore, really. They're old school, okay? But we're not interested in the actual look of the page today. We're only interested in the code there. So this built-in function, math.random, that's going to return a value between 0 and 1. Okay? So it's going to give you back a real number, like something like 0.347219, whatever. Or 0.718229, whatever. So could you listen up now, guys, and stop with the typing? It's one of those strange noises. For students, you know, ye old scraping on the blackboard is annoying, but for lecturers, the little tappity tap 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 just bores in your brain, and its annoyance is totally out of proportion to the actual volume of the sound. Okay? Now, so math.random will generate a real number between 0 and 1, which isn't a lot of use, but we can work with that. So here we put into a variable called rand, math.random. Okay? And that's going to hold then a number between 0 and 1. In this next line here then, we're taking rand and we're multiplying it by 6, which will give us a number between 0 and 6. So like if you had 0.51 or something, you'd end up with, what would you end up with? You'd end up with 3 point something something something. So it'll give you a random number between 0 and 6. Now it'll be a random real number. So there'll be a decimal part to that. And then what round does is that'll take that real number and round it out to an integer. So then we won't have a real number between 0 and 6. We'll have a whole number, an integer between 0 and 6. So my int, as I've called it there, will be a 0, or a 1, or a 2, or a 3, or a 4, or a 5, or a 6. So it's important now to follow the path of that logic there, because I think people struggle with this. So we're starting off with math.random, and that will give us a real number between 0 and 1. I don't think it ever quite gets to 1, but I'm not sure. Up to exclusive of 1. Okay, so it goes up to kind of 0.999999 whatever, but it wouldn't be stored like that anyway, you see, so it's stored using a floating point. So we have a real number between 0 and 1. If we multiply that by 6, we'll get a real number between 0 and 6, but not quite 6. And then we use math.round to round that number up or down to the nearest integer, which will give us then a 0, or a 1, or a 2, or a 3, or a 4, or a 5, or a 6. And that's more useful to us. Now, what this does then is it builds up an image tag piece by piece by piece, and one of the pieces is that random number that we generated. But this is tricky because we're building up the HTML for an image tag, and as part of that image tag, where you specify the file name and the attributes and stuff, you use quotes. So there's a bit of a head wrecker here in terms of the quotes, because you want to quote a quote. You want to put a quote into the quotes, but you don't want to end the quote. And so that causes some confusion. So we look at that closely. But what we're trying to say here is we're trying to say something like img src equals quote page photo 04 dot jpg quote slash brbr. So we're trying to output an image tag. So remember an image tag, it had an img src equals quote, the name of the file, quote, and some other stuff, but we're going to leave that out here because it could get confusing. Okay, so this is an older version. I had a zoomed in one of that. That's unfortunate now. Okay, so looking here, let's see if I can use my mouse. No, no mouse. Okay. So the first quote, so we have document.write, and the first string we're outputting is the string that has open bracket img src equals slash quote page dash photo 0. We want to output that string. One of the problems we have is that inside in that string there's a quote. So that slash there, src slash quote, The job of that slash is to say that the quote that comes after me is a quote that's in the string. It's not a quote marking the end of the string. So it's an escape character. So if you didn't have that slash, you'd be saying output img src equals, which is fair enough. But then page photo 0 on its own means nothing. So then you have a syntax error. So what we're outputting is img src equals page photo 0. And that slash in there is to ensure that the quote is read as an embedded quote inside in the string and not marking the end of the string. So that's on the one hand very simple, on the other hand can totally wreck your head, man. So you just need to watch that. Okay? We're joining strings together now. So now we're saying plus and we're saying myint. So that's outputting the number, which was whatever we said, 4 perhaps, or it could be 1, could be 2, could be 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever the random number generator process gave us to put into myint. And then we're outputting .jpg quote slash to end the image tag and brbr. So that would output an image tag, albeit not a valid one, mind you. There's bits missing, but we'll deal with those later. And then the next line there is just saying document.write, this is an image, this is image number whatever, just so we can actually see what it was. Okay? So any questions on that? So that's a tricky one, but a fun one. So I can show you that working. Where is it gone? So this is image number 5. This is image number 0. Image number 2. 2 again. 0, 5, 5, 1, 2, 4, and so on. 1. Okay? Now the images must be named correctly. So you can see here the images are called, in this case, page photo 00. Page photo 01. So you're making up an image, you're building an image tag up. So the image tag must include the name of the image, and that must match the actual file name. So the code and then the images have to match up. Any questions on that? So I'd like you to do something like that, but with your own images.